The desperate call. The Zephyrian homeworld of Celestine hung like a blue jewel against the star-speckled void, its crystalline cities gleaming beneath twin suns. For 3,000 years, the peaceful Zephyrians had lived in harmony, their advanced technology focused on art, medicine, and exploration rather than warfare. Their slender, translucent forms moved gracefully through floating gardens and bioluminescent towers, a civilization that had transcended the need for conflict. Admiral Thessara stood before the massive viewport of the orbital defense station, her opalescent skin shimmering with anxiety patterns that her people could read like an open book. The invasion fleet approaching their system was unlike anything in their historical records. Massive, angular vessels of dark metal bristled with weapon arrays that defied conventional understanding. The attacking force belonged to the Corvani hegemony, a militaristic empire that had been consuming peaceful worlds for the past century. How long until they reached the outer defensive perimeter? Thessara asked, her voice carrying the melodic tones characteristic of her species. 47 hours, Admiral, replied Communications Officer Valen, his normally calm demeanor cracked with worry. Our defensive satellites won't hold them for more than minutes. Their technology is centuries ahead of our peaceful innovations. Thessara's primary arms trembled slightly as she activated the holographic display, showing their pitifully small defensive fleet. 12 research vessels, hastily retrofitted with mining lasers and cargo haulers equipped with improvised shields. Against the approaching armada of 200 warships, they might as well have been throwing pebbles at a storm. The Corvani had earned their fearsome reputation through systematic conquest. They specialized in targeting peaceful civilizations, studying their weaknesses for months before striking with overwhelming force. Their tactics were ruthless but effective, complete domination through superior firepower and psychological warfare. Entire species had been enslaved or exterminated under their relentless expansion. Have we received any responses to our diplomatic overtures? Thessara inquired, though she already knew the answer. Negative, Admiral. The Corvani don't engage in diplomacy with what they consider inferior species. Their only communication was a demand for unconditional surrender and immediate preparation for assimilation into their labor forces. The weight of 3 billion lives pressed down on Thessara's shoulders. As the highest-ranking military officer of a species that barely understood military hierarchy, she faced an impossible decision. The Zephyrians had allies among the peaceful races of the galaxy, but none possessed the military capability to challenge the Corvani hegemony. The crystalline collective was too far away, the harmony worlds were already under siege, and the meditation spheres had withdrawn from galactic politics entirely. What about the emergency protocols? Asked Science Officer Mylen, her voice barely above a whisper. The ancient agreements established during the founding of the Peaceful Alliance? Thessara's skin patterns shifted to deep purple, indicating profound contemplation. The emergency protocols were a desperate measure, designed as a last resort when peaceful civilizations faced extinction. They had never been activated in recorded history, existing more as a theoretical safety net than a practical solution. The protocols authorized the transmission of a galaxy-wide distress signal, broadcasting on all known frequencies and using every available communication method. The risk is enormous, Thessara said slowly. Broadcasting our location and situation to the entire galaxy could attract more predators than saviors. We know so little about the species beyond our local cluster. Admiral, Valen interrupted urgently, long-range sensors are detecting energy signatures consistent with planetary bombardment weapons. The Corvani aren't planning occupation. They're preparing for complete annihilation. The revelation hit the bridge like a physical blow. The Zephyrians had assumed the Corvani wanted them alive for labor, but the sensor readings suggested something far worse. The approaching fleet carried planet crackers, weapons designed to shatter worlds into cosmic debris. This wasn't conquest. It was genocide. "Activate the emergency protocols," Thesara commanded, her voice steady despite the gravity of the decision. "Broadcast on all frequencies, every communication array we possess. Include our technological specifications, cultural database, and complete star charts of our region. If we're going to die, at least our knowledge will survive." The next several hours passed in frantic preparation. Engineers worked desperately to boost signal strength, while xenolinguists crafted the message in every known language format. The distress signal would contain not just a plea for help, but a complete record of Zephyrian civilization, their art, their science, their dreams for a peaceful galaxy. As the massive communication arrays powered up across the Celestine system, Thesara allowed herself a moment of doubt. The galaxy was vast and largely unexplored beyond their peaceful corner. Who might receive their desperate call? What civilizations lurked in the darkness between stars? The emergency protocols had been created with the assumption that other peaceful species would respond with aid, but what if the galaxy was dominated by predators like the Corvani? "Signal is ready for transmission, Admiral," Valen reported. "All arrays synchronized and operating at maximum power." "Send it," Thesara ordered. "May the stars carry our words to those who would answer." The signal burst forth from Celestine, racing through subspace at speeds that defied conventional physics. It carried the hopes and fears of an entire civilization, a digital bottle cast into the cosmic ocean with no guarantee of rescue. The message was simple yet profound. Peaceful people facing extinction, requesting aid from any who valued life over conquest. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. The Corvani fleet continued its inexorable approach, while Zephyrian engineers worked frantically to strengthen their pitiful defenses. Civilian evacuation ships launched from the surface, though there were far too few to save even a fraction of the population. The planet's children were given priority, loaded aboard the fastest vessels with instructions to seek refuge in the outer asteroid fields. "Admiral," Communications Officer Valen called out, his voice tight with excitement. "We're receiving responses to our distress signal." Thesara's hopes soared momentarily, before crashing back to reality as Valen continued his report. "Multiple species are acknowledging our transmission, but..." He paused, his skin shifting to patterns of deep regret. "They're expressing sympathy but cannot provide military assistance. The Corvani hegemony is too powerful. Most responders are peaceful civilizations like ourselves, lacking the capability to challenge such a formidable force." More responses trickled in over the following hours. Academic institutions requesting copies of Zephyrian cultural databases for preservation. Refugee organizations offering to accept survivors if any escape pods reached their territories. Religious groups promising prayers and remembrance ceremonies. All well-intentioned, all utterly inadequate against the approaching doom. As the Corvani fleet entered the outer system, their intentions became horrifyingly clear. Advanced scouts began systematically destroying orbital installations, while the main fleet positioned itself for planetary bombardment. The Zephyrians' improvised defense fleet managed to destroy 2 scout ships before being overwhelmed, their brave sacrifice buying mere minutes of additional time. "Admiral," Valen said quietly, "there's one more response coming through. The signal is different, more powerful than anything we've seen before." "Put it through," Thesara ordered, though she held little hope for salvation at this late hour. The voice that emerged from the communication array was unlike anything in Zephyrian experience. Deep, gravelly, carrying undertones that seemed to vibrate through the ship's hull itself. When it spoke, the translator system struggled to process the alien syntax and aggressive tonal patterns. "This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet responding to your distress call. We're currently 47 light-years from your position and preparing for immediate jump space transit. Hold your position and maintain defensive protocols until our arrival." You are no longer alone. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Terrestrials, a species completely unknown to their databases, claiming to operate a defense fleet capable of crossing vast galactic distances. More importantly, they seemed prepared to engage the Corvani rather than simply offering sympathy from a safe distance. "Admiral," Science Officer Meelan said hesitantly, "our long-range sensors aren't detecting any fleet movement from that vector. If they're truly 47 light-years away, even with the most advanced propulsion systems, it would take weeks to reach us." Thesera nodded grimly. Either these terrestrials were lying about their capabilities, or they possessed technology so advanced it defied known physics. Both possibilities seemed equally unlikely. But hope was a powerful force even in the face of impossible odds. "Continue monitoring all frequencies," she ordered, "and prepare final evacuation procedures. If these terrestrials prove unable to assist, we'll at least ensure some of our people survive to carry on our culture." The Corvani bombardment fleet had nearly reached optimal firing position when space itself seemed to tear open near the edge of the system. Reality twisted and buckled as something massive forced its way through dimensions that shouldn't exist. The phenomenon defied every law of physics in Zephyrian understanding, creating gravitational waves that registered on sensors across the system. What emerged from the impossible rift made the Corvani fleet look like toys by comparison. The lead vessel alone dwarfed the largest Corvani dreadnought, its hull a patchwork of battle scars and weapon systems that spoke of countless conflicts. Behind it came dozens more ships, each one designed with a singular purpose that was unmistakably clear even to the peaceful Zephyrians. These were instruments of war, refined through generations of conflict into perfect expressions of controlled violence. "By the twin suns," Valen whispered, his skin displaying patterns of awe and terror in equal measure. "What manner of species builds ships like these?" As if in answer to his question, the communication array crackled to life once more. The same gravelly voice as before, but now carrying an edge that made veteran diplomats instinctively step back from the speakers. "Corvani vessels. This is Admiral Chen of the human fleet. You have exactly 60 seconds to cease hostile actions and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning." The response from the Corvani came in the form of weapons fire directed at the nearest human vessel. Energy beams that could shatter mountains struck the alien ship's hull and simply disappeared, absorbed by defensive systems that operated on principles beyond current understanding. What followed would forever change the Zephyrians' understanding of what warfare could become when practiced by a species that had elevated it to an art form. The humans had come in answer to a desperate plea for help, and they intended to deliver exactly what was requested: salvation through superior firepower and the kind of tactical brilliance that only emerged from a civilization that had spent millennia learning how to kill its enemies efficiently. The Deathworld fleet. The human response to Corvani aggression was swift and devastating. Admiral Marcus Chen's flagship, the UTS Retribution, moved through space with predatory grace despite its massive size. The vessel's hull bore the scars of 100 battles, each mark telling stories of conflicts across the galaxy where humanity had learned the hard lessons of survival. Chen stood on his bridge, a compact man whose weathered features spoke of decades spent commanding warships in hostile space. His bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, their movements economical and precise in a way that only came from extensive combat experience. Unlike the crystalline beauty of Zephyrian command centers, the human bridge was purely functional. Displays showing tactical information, weapon status, and enemy positions dominated every surface. "Tactical analysis complete, sir," reported Commander Sarah Walsh, Chen's executive officer. "Corvani fleet consists of 212 vessels. Standard hegemony battle formation with heavy cruisers forming the outer shell and dreadnoughts positioned for planetary bombardment. They're using predictable patterns consistent with their previous campaigns against peaceful civilizations? Chen nodded grimly. Intelligence reports on the Corvani hegemony had painted a clear picture of their methodology. They were bullies on a galactic scale, targeting species that couldn't fight back and using overwhelming force to crush any resistance. It was a strategy that worked well against peaceful civilizations, but had one critical flaw. The Corvani had never faced an opponent that actually wanted to fight. "Sir," communications specialist Rodriguez called out, "we're receiving multiple hails from the Corvani fleet. They're demanding our immediate withdrawal and threatening to add us to their target list." "Ignore them," Chen ordered. "Helm, bring us into weapons range. All ships, prepare for combat operations. Rules of engagement are weapons free on all hostile targets. Priority is protecting the civilian population. Secondary objective is complete elimination of Corvani forces in this system." The human fleet spread out into attack formation with mechanical precision. Each ship knew its role, each captain understood the battle plan without needing detailed orders. This was doctrine developed through centuries of warfare, refined in conflicts against pirates, alien aggressors, and occasionally other human factions during the darker periods of their history. The Zephyrians watched in amazement as the human vessels moved. Where their own ships were graceful and artistic, designed for exploration and peaceful contact, the human fleet was purely predatory. Every line of their hulls spoke of violent purpose, every weapon array positioned for maximum tactical advantage. These were ships built by a species that understood war at a fundamental level. Admiral Thesara found herself both fascinated and horrified by the human response. Communications Officer Valen, "Are you monitoring their tactical channels?" "Yes, Admiral, though their language is intense. They use terminology we don't have equivalent translations for. Words that seem to carry concepts of violence as abstract art forms." The first engagement between human and Corvani forces lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. A squadron of Corvani heavy cruisers, confident in their superiority over any peaceful civilization, moved to intercept the human advance. What they encountered instead was a level of coordinated firepower that redefined their understanding of space combat. Human weapons technology appeared deceptively simple compared to the exotic energy systems favored by more advanced civilizations. Kinetic projectiles, directed energy beams, and missile systems seemed almost primitive until they demonstrated their effectiveness. Where other species had developed elegant solutions to warfare, humans had perfected brutal efficiency. The lead Corvani cruiser simply ceased to exist as a coordinated barrage from 3 human destroyers overwhelmed its defenses. The second vessel managed to return fire before being crippled by a railgun shot that punched through its armor like tissue paper. Within minutes, the entire Corvani squadron was either destroyed or drifting helplessly in space. "By the void," whispered Corvani Fleet Admiral Krex as he watched the tactical display. "What manner of primitives fights with such directness?" His question was answered when the human fleet opened general communications, broadcasting on frequencies that the entire system could monitor. Admiral Chen's voice carried across space with calm authority that somehow made the threat more terrifying than screaming rage would have been. "Corvani forces, this is your final warning. You have 60 seconds to begin immediate withdrawal from this system. Any vessel that fires on civilian targets or fails to comply with withdrawal orders will be destroyed without further warning. We are not interested in negotiation, conditional surrender, or tactical discussions. Comply or be eliminated." The Corvani response came in the form of their entire battle fleet opening fire on the human vessels. Energy weapons designed to crack planetary shields struck human hull armor and were absorbed by defensive systems that operated on principles the Corvani couldn't understand. Missile volleys that could devastate orbital installations were intercepted by point defense networks so dense They created walls of destructive energy. What the Corvani discovered in that moment was that they had built their fleet to fight opponents who would try to minimize casualties and seek diplomatic solutions. Humans, it appeared, had designed their ships with the opposite assumption, that their enemies would fight to the death and show no mercy. The human counterattack began with a demonstration that redefined the Corvani understanding of tactical doctrine. Instead of engaging in a traditional fleet action, the humans split their forces into smaller groups that moved with independent coordination. Each group targeted specific Corvani formations with weapons that seemed designed specifically to counter their defensive systems. Admiral Chen's tactical philosophy was brutally simple: identify the enemy's center of gravity and destroy it completely. For the Corvani, this meant their command ships and their ability to coordinate the fleet action. Human strike groups ignored the outer defensive formations and drove straight for the heavy cruisers that served as fleet coordination nodes. The UTS Vengeance, a heavy destroyer under Captain Lisa Nakamura, demonstrated human tactical thinking by diving directly into the heart of a Corvani formation. Where conventional wisdom suggested maintaining standoff range and engaging in artillery duels, the human vessel closed to knife-fighting range and began systematically dismantling enemy ships with close-range weapons that the Corvani had never encountered. "Sir," reported Tactical Officer Martinez from the Retribution's bridge, "Captain Nakamura reports successful elimination of Corvani Command Cluster 7. Enemy coordination in that sector has collapsed." Chen nodded approvingly. Nakamura had earned her reputation fighting pirate fleets in the outer systems, where close-quarters combat was the norm rather than the exception. Her crew knew how to make their weapons count when shields and armor failed, and they understood that sometimes the best defense was overwhelming offense. The battle evolved into a masterclass in applied violence that left the observing Zephyrians struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. Human ships moved through the Corvani formation like apex predators, each engagement calculated to maximum psychological as well as physical damage. They didn't just destroy enemy vessels, they eliminated them so completely that watching Corvani crews began to question their fundamental assumptions about their own invincibility. Admiral Thesara found herself recording the engagement for future analysis, though she doubted her people would ever need to understand such tactics. "Science Officer Milen, are you analyzing their weapons technology?" "Attempting to, Admiral, but their systems operate on principles that seem deliberately optimized for destruction rather than efficiency. Where we might use elegant force fields to disable an enemy, they use kinetic projectiles to simply remove the enemy from existence." The human approach to warfare was indeed fundamentally different from anything in Zephyrian experience. Where peaceful civilizations had developed weapons as deterrents or last resorts, humans appeared to have developed warfare as a science. Every tactic was designed for maximum effectiveness, every weapon system optimized to kill rather than disable, every strategic decision calculated to achieve complete victory rather than negotiated settlement. Admiral Krex found himself facing a tactical situation that his training had never prepared him for. The humans weren't fighting to establish negotiating positions or demonstrate superiority. They were methodically destroying his fleet with the same clinical efficiency they might use to clear space debris. His vessels, designed to intimidate peaceful civilizations through overwhelming displays of force, were being systematically eliminated by an enemy that treated intimidation as irrelevant. "Admiral," his communications officer reported with barely controlled panic, "the human fleet is hailing us directly." Chen's voice filled the Corvani flagship's bridge, carrying a tone that somehow managed to be both conversational and absolutely deadly. "Admiral Krex, I believe it is. My intelligence officers have provided me with detailed files on your career and your species' tactical doctrine. You specialize in fighting opponents who value the lives of their civilians more than military victory. Today, you're fighting humans. We value both equally, which means we're prepared to do whatever is necessary to ensure our friends survive." The implications of that statement hit Krex like a physical blow. The humans weren't just militarily superior, they were psychologically prepared for total warfare in a way that peaceful civilizations could never match. They would sacrifice anything to protect their allies, and they possessed the technological capability to make that sacrifice meaningful. "What do you want?" Krex transmitted back, his voice carrying the first notes of uncertainty. "Complete withdrawal from this system, and a guarantee that Corvani forces will never again threaten any peaceful civilization in this sector. In return, I'll allow your surviving ships to retreat with their crews intact. Refuse, and we'll demonstrate why peaceful species across the galaxy send distress calls when they're threatened rather than trying to handle problems like you themselves." The choice facing Admiral Krex was stark and immediate. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought with a combination of technological superiority and tactical ruthlessness that his people had never encountered. The humans weren't just better armed. They were fundamentally different in their approach to conflict, treating warfare as a necessary evil to be executed with maximum efficiency rather than a tool for political intimidation. As another Corvani battle group disappeared under coordinated human fire, Krex realized that his species had finally encountered something they had never faced before: predators more effective than themselves. The price of protection. The aftermath of the battle left the Celestine system forever changed. Debris from Corvani vessels drifted through space like metallic snow, while human salvage teams methodically collected anything of intelligence value. Admiral Chen had accepted the Corvani surrender after destroying 70% of their fleet, demonstrating a combination of mercy and pragmatism that left both allies and enemies uncertain about human motivations. Admiral Thesara stood in her rebuilt command center, watching human engineering teams assist with repairs to Zephyrian orbital installations. The humans worked with efficient professionalism, their technology seamlessly interfacing with Zephyrian systems despite being based on completely different scientific principles. It was becoming clear that humanity's technological development had followed paths that prioritized adaptability and effectiveness over elegance. "Admiral Chen is requesting a private meeting," Communications Officer Valen reported, his skin patterns still displaying residual amazement at the recent events. "He's aboard a small craft approaching our station." Thesara had been both anticipating and dreading this moment. The humans had saved her civilization from extinction, but their demonstration of military capability had raised questions that peaceful species rarely needed to consider. What did a warrior culture want in exchange for protection? What were the long-term implications of alliance with beings who treated warfare as a routine function of government? The human shuttle that docked with the Zephyrian station was as functional and utilitarian as their warships, designed for efficiency rather than aesthetic appeal. Admiral Chen emerged wearing what appeared to be a dress uniform, though it retained the practical qualities that seemed to characterize all human equipment. He was accompanied by 2 officers who carried themselves with the alert readiness of professional soldiers. "Admiral Thesara," Chen said, offering a gesture that Zephyrian cultural databases identified as a formal greeting among human military personnel. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I believe we have much to discuss." The Zephyrian admiral studied her human counterpart with curiosity. Chen appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, his features bearing the kind of weathered confidence that came from years of command responsibility. His uniform bore decorations that suggested extensive combat experience, but his manner was courteous rather than aggressive. "Admiral Chen, my people owe you a debt that can never adequately be repaid. You arrived in our darkest hour and saved us from extinction. We are deeply grateful, but we also find ourselves wondering about your motivations. Humans were unknown to our databases before today." Chen nodded thoughtfully. That's understandable. Humanity has been deliberately maintaining a low galactic profile while we establish our position among the various civilizations. We've been monitoring communications, studying political patterns, and developing our understanding of how different species interact. Your distress call represented our first major intervention in galactic affairs. And yet you responded so quickly, with such overwhelming force. Your fleet crossed impossible distances in hours rather than weeks. What drives humans to develop such capabilities? The human admiral's expression grew somber as he considered his response. Admiral, my species evolved on what galactic xenobiologists would classify as a death world. Our planet challenged us in ways that most civilizations never experience. We developed technology not as an expression of artistic achievement, but as tools for survival against a hostile environment and, eventually, against each other. He activated a portable holographic projector that displayed images of Earth, vast oceans racked by storms, continents scarred by volcanic activity, weather systems that could devastate entire regions without warning. We learned early that the universe doesn't care about our survival. If we wanted to live, we had to fight for it. That philosophy has shaped every aspect of our development. Thessara studied the images with growing understanding. Zephyrian homeworld was a paradise of stable weather patterns and abundant resources, where natural selection had favored cooperation and artistic achievement over competitive survival. The contrast with human evolutionary pressures was stark and illuminating. Your species developed in permanent conflict, she observed. Against your environment, against each other, against the very concept of peaceful coexistence. How do we know that humans won't eventually view other species as threats to be eliminated? Chen's response was immediate and surprisingly thoughtful. Because we've learned the difference between necessary violence and pointless destruction. The Corvani represent a threat to peaceful civilizations across this sector. They needed to be stopped, not because we enjoy fighting, but because some things are worth fighting for. The survival of species like yours is one of those things. He gestured toward the viewport where Zephyrian children could be seen playing in the restored orbital gardens, their laughter carrying through the station's corridors. We didn't come here to conquer or control. We came because beings who create beauty and pursue knowledge are rare in this galaxy, and they deserve protection from those who would destroy them simply because they can. The philosophical implications of Chen's words resonated deeply with Zephyrian thinking. Their culture had always struggled with the concept of justified violence, preferring to believe that all conflicts could be resolved through communication and compromise. The human perspective suggested that some conflicts were inevitable and that the outcome depended on which side was better prepared to fight. What do humans want from us in return for this protection? Thessara asked, addressing the question that had been troubling her since the battle ended. Nothing that you wouldn't freely give to friends, Chen replied. Cultural exchange, scientific cooperation, mutual assistance in matters of common interest. We're not interested in tribute or political subordination. What we want is an alliance between equals, each contributing their unique strengths to common goals. And what would humans contribute to such an alliance? Chen's smile carried a hint of predatory satisfaction. We'll handle the problems that peaceful civilizations can't solve themselves. Pirates, aggressive empires, anyone who believes that might makes right. You continue doing what you do best, advancing knowledge, creating art, building civilizations worth protecting. We'll make sure you have the time and security to do it. The proposal was both attractive and troubling. Alliance with humans would provide security that the Zephyrians could never achieve independently, but it also meant accepting that violence was sometimes necessary and that their peaceful ideals required violent protection to survive. It challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of civilization and morality. Admiral, Science Officer Milan interjected hesitantly, if I may ask, How many species has humanity contacted in this manner? You're the first, Chen admitted. We've been watching, learning, preparing for the right moment to emerge as a galactic power. Your distress call represented exactly the kind of situation where human intervention could make a meaningful difference. We couldn't stand by and watch a peaceful civilization be destroyed by aggressive predators. The revelation that humanity was essentially announcing its presence on the galactic stage through their rescue of the Zephyrians added new dimensions to the situation. Earth's children were positioning themselves as protectors of peaceful civilizations, but their long-term goals remained unclear. What kind of galactic order did they envision, and what role would violence play in maintaining it? Over the following days, cultural exchange began in earnest. Human scientists shared technological innovations that could enhance Zephyrian defensive capabilities without compromising their peaceful nature. Zephyrian artists created works that captured the complex emotions surrounding their rescue by warrior philosophers from across the galaxy. The collaboration revealed that both species had much to offer each other despite their radically different evolutionary paths. The most significant development came when Admiral Chen proposed the establishment of a mutual defense treaty that would extend human protection to any peaceful civilization willing to join what he termed the Guardian Alliance. The proposal suggested that humanity envisioned a galaxy where aggressive empires like the Corvani would face coordinated resistance from species that had previously been easy targets. "You're offering to become the galaxy's police force," Thessera observed during one of their strategy sessions. "More like the galaxy's immune system," Chen corrected. "Police forces maintain order within civilized societies. What we're proposing is protection against the kind of predators that destroy civilization itself. Species like yours shouldn't have to choose between developing weapons of mass destruction or facing extinction when aggressive neighbors decide you look like easy prey." The implications were staggering. Humanity was proposing to take responsibility for galactic security, offering their military expertise to species that had never needed to develop it themselves. In exchange, they wanted cultural and scientific partnerships that would benefit all involved parties. It was a form of specialization on a galactic scale. Humans would handle the violence, while others advanced knowledge and civilization. News of the Guardian Alliance spread rapidly through peaceful civilizations across the galaxy. Species that had lived in constant fear of aggressive neighbors began sending diplomatic missions to establish contact with humanity. The Crystalline Collective, the Harmony Worlds, and dozens of smaller civilizations expressed interest in trading scientific cooperation for military protection. But the alliance also attracted attention from less peaceful quarters. The surviving Corvani fleet had carried word of human capabilities back to the hegemony's core worlds, where military leaders struggled to understand how their invincible forces had been so decisively defeated. Other aggressive civilizations began reassessing their expansion plans in light of this new galactic power that seemed specifically designed to counter their advantages. Admiral Thessera found herself serving as humanity's first alien ambassador, helping to negotiate the terms of alliance membership with species that had never needed to consider military alliances. The work was challenging but fulfilling, offering her people a role in galactic affairs that their peaceful nature had never allowed before. "You realize what you've done," she told Chen during one of their planning sessions. "You've changed the fundamental balance of power in the galaxy. Peaceful civilizations no longer have to choose between militarization and vulnerability." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "That was always the plan, though we weren't sure how it would work in practice. Humans learned long ago that peace requires strength to survive. Now we're offering to provide that strength to species that prefer to pursue more constructive goals." The Guardian Alliance represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a military power that sought to protect rather than dominate, offering its capabilities to preserve diversity rather than impose uniformity. Whether humanity could maintain its philosophical balance while wielding such enormous power remained to be seen. But for the first time in centuries, peaceful civilizations had reason to hope that the galaxy might become a safer place for those who valued life over conquest. As the Sarah watched human ships patrolling the edge of Zephyrian space, she reflected on the strange turn of events that had brought two very different species together. They had sent out a desperate SOS hoping for help, and instead had found protectors who redefined what protection could mean. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps that was exactly what it needed.